Throughout the history of religion and myth, there are names that linger in the shadows, whispered rather than proclaimed. Among them, Lilith is perhaps the most haunting. Who was she really? Was she Adam's first wife, cast aside for refusing to submit? Or was she a demon queen, feared across cultures as the mother of monsters and seducer of men? This question has fascinated scholars, mystics, and seekers of truth for centuries, and today we venture into that mystery together. The canonical Bible, as most know it, says nothing of Lilith living alongside Adam in Eden, and yet Jewish folklore, mystical texts, and later interpretations present a startling possibility. Before Eve was ever formed from Adam's rib, another woman stood beside him, one made from the same clay, equal in origin, equal in strength, and unwilling to bow. Her name was Lilith, and it is here, in this hidden corner of tradition, that we uncover a story unlike anything taught in Sunday school. In this version, Lilith is no silent companion. She speaks. She resists. She argues that if she and Adam were created from the same earth, then neither should dominate the other. But when Adam insists on control, Lilith utters the unutterable, the sacred name of God. With this act of rebellion, she takes flight from Eden, leaving Adam alone. To some, she becomes a symbol of defiance and equality, the first woman who refused to be silenced. To others, her departure marks the birth of darkness as she transforms into a night demon, lurking at the edges of human life. This duality, Lilith as liberator and Lilith as destroyer, is what makes her legend so enduring. On one hand, she embodies the ancient fear of uncontrolled female power, sexuality unbound, motherhood inverted, a being who takes rather than gives. On the other, she represents a kind of archetypal independence that resonates deeply with modern seekers. The voice that says, "I will not be less than what I am." In this journey, we will not settle for a single definition of Lilith. Instead, we will trace her path across civilizations, from the Sumerian myths of demon goddesses through Jewish mystical traditions, into Christian and Islamic echoes, and even into modern occult practices and psychological archetypes. We will ask hard questions. Why was her story erased from scripture but preserved in folklore? Why did she shift from equal partner to demon queen? And most importantly, what does her presence, hidden yet persistent, reveal about humanity's struggle with power, gender, and the sacred? Stay with me until the very end, for Lilith's tale is more than just a myth. It is a mirror, reflecting back truths that many traditions have tried to bury, and it may just change the way you see both the Bible and yourself. To understand Lilith's mystery, we must travel back to the earliest whispers of civilization, long before the Bible was compiled into the form we know today. In ancient Mesopotamia, long before the Israelites told their sacred stories, figures resembling Lilith already appeared in the mythological landscape. Sumerian and Babylonian texts speak of female night spirits, seductive and dangerous, who threatened mothers and newborn children. Among them were the Lilu and Lilitu, wind and night demons associated with storms, lust, and death. These spirits were feared as forces that could not be tamed, and it is from this cultural soil that the character of Lilith begins to take root. Centuries later, Jewish tradition absorbed and reshaped these motifs. One of the most significant sources we have is a medieval text known as the Alphabet of Ben Sira, written sometime between the 8th and 10th centuries. Though not part of the Bible itself, this text gave Lilith her most famous identity: Adam's first wife. According to the story, God formed Adam and Lilith together from the same dust of the earth. Unlike Eve, who would later be created from Adam's rib, Lilith was Adam's equal in every sense, born of the same substance, shaped by the same divine hands. The conflict begins almost immediately. When Adam seeks to assert dominance over her, Lilith refuses. She declares, "We are equal, for we are both made of the earth." This refusal to submit is not merely an act of pride, but a radical rejection of the patriarchal order embedded in the story of creation. Rather than accept a secondary role, she chooses exile. The tale recounts that she pronounced the ineffable name of God, a sacred act of power, and flew away from Eden, leaving Adam behind. For the rabbis and mystics who preserved this tale, Lilith's rebellion posed a problem. How could the perfection of Eden be disturbed by such disobedience? The solution was to recast her not as a wronged partner, but as a dangerous figure. In the Ben Sira account, God sends angels to bring her back. She refuses, choosing instead to live near the Red Sea, where she becomes the mother of countless demonic offspring. From this moment on, Lilith is marked as dangerous. She is accused of strangling newborn infants, seducing men in their dreams, and unleashing terror in the night. Yet notice the transformation here. The same act that could be interpreted as courage, asserting equality, claiming autonomy, is reframed as monstrous. Lilith becomes the archetype of the dangerous woman, a pattern we see repeated across cultures and ages. What cannot be controlled is demonized. What will not submit is labeled a threat. And yet, even in her demonized form, Lilith remained central to the imagination of Jewish households. Amulets were crafted, and prayers recited to ward her off. Mothers placed protective charms above cradles, invoking the names of angels said to guard against her. Ironically, this ensured her survival in cultural memory. Though excluded from the official canon, Lilith could not be erased. Instead, she lived on in the margins, feared, invoked, and whispered about for centuries. Thus, the forgotten story of Lilith is not merely a curiosity of folklore. It is a window into how traditions shape, twist, and preserve figures who refuse to conform. By the time the Middle Ages arrived, Lilith had already become more than just a legend. She was an archetype, embodying the shadow side of creation itself, the one who was equal, the one who fled, the one who became something both feared and forbidden. If the alphabet of Ben Sira planted the seed of Lilith's reputation, it was Jewish mysticism that allowed her image to grow into something far more complex. Within the intricate world of midrashic storytelling, Kabbalistic visions, and the mystical text known as the Zohar, Lilith was no longer just Adam's rebellious first wife. She became a cosmic force, a feminine shadow, a presence dwelling in the margins of holiness, embodying everything dangerous about desire and defiance. The rabbis who engaged with Lilith in Midrash often placed her in narratives designed to explain the presence of evil in the world. If God created everything good, where did the forces of death, lust, and destruction come from? Lilith became one answer. She was described as the consort of Samael, the dark angel often equated with Satan, forming a shadow couple opposite Adam and Eve. In this role, she was not just a figure of rebellion. She was a queen of unholy realms, ruling the demonic host and birthing creatures of chaos. The Zohar, one of the foundational texts of Kabbalah, written in 13th century Spain, wove Lilith deeply into its mystical fabric. Here, she appears as the embodiment of the other side, the Sitra Achra, the dark mirror of divine creation. She is associated with the realm of the Qlifoth, the shells or husks that cling to holiness but corrupt it. In this context, Lilith becomes more than a myth. She becomes a metaphysical principle. Just as Eve represents life, fertility, and harmony, Lilith symbolizes seduction, barrenness, and discord. Yet the fascination with Lilith was not only theological. She haunted daily life. Jewish households across medieval Europe and the Middle East developed traditions to guard against her. Lilith was believed to target newborn children, especially boys under 8 days old before circumcision. Mothers feared her presence in the birthing chamber, where death in childbirth was tragically common. To protect their infants, families hung amulets inscribed with the names of 3 protective angels, Senoi, Sansenoi, and Semangelov, the very angel said to have once pursued Lilith after she fled Eden. This practice reveals something profound. Lilith was not just a mythological figure. She was treated as a real threat, one that demanded ritual defense. Night after night, as lamps burned low and children cried in their cradles, parents whispered prayers against her. In the collective imagination, Lilith was as present as she was terrifying. But there is also a paradox here. By giving her so much attention, in stories, in rituals, in mystical speculation, Jewish tradition ensured that Lilith could never truly disappear. Her name may not be canonized in the Torah, but she lives in the footnotes, the margins, and the fears that shaped everyday piety. This marginality itself is telling. She represents what religion tries to repress, but cannot fully silence. Through the lens of Jewish mysticism, Lilith becomes a mirror for the anxieties of the community. She embodies the dangers of uncontrolled sexuality, the grief of infant mortality, and the unease with female independence. Yet she also holds a strange allure, a reminder of the power hidden in the feminine shadow, the counterpart to creation that cannot be wholly denied. Lilith in the Midrash and Kabbalah is not a flat character. She is layered, contradictory, and elusive, at once a demoness, a queen, a mother of monsters, and a cosmic principle. Her presence reminds us that the stories excluded from the canon often carry the deepest truths about human fear, desire, and the mystery of evil itself. To understand why Lilith was demonized so persistently, we must look beyond folklore and mysticism and examine the cultural dynamics of the societies that told her story. At the heart of Lilith's tale is a conflict over power. Specifically, the refusal of a woman to accept subordination. When Adam demanded authority, Lilith's defiance challenged not just her husband, but the very patriarchal framework that underpinned ancient religion. Her rejection of submission struck at the roots of an order where men ruled and women were expected to obey. In such a framework, Lilith could not remain a heroine. She had to be recast as a villain. This backlash becomes stark when we compare her story with that of Eve. Eve is created from Adam's rib, a being literally derived from man. She is designed to be a helper, one step removed in essence and purpose. When she errs in Genesis, her mistake is framed as naivety or weakness. Lilith, however, is never allowed such softness. Her choice is framed as deliberate rebellion, a conscious act of insubordination. Where Eve is forgiven as misguided, Lilith is condemned as monstrous. This contrast is not accidental. It reflects an ancient fear. The woman who dares to stand as equal is far more dangerous than the woman who merely stumbles. Over time, this fear crystallized into her demonic image. Lilith was cast not just as a rebel, but as the enemy of family life itself. The seductress who lures men into sin, the murderer of infants, the bringer of barrenness. In patriarchal cultures where women were valued for their obedience, chastity, and motherhood, Lilith embodied the nightmare of a woman who rejected all three. The demonization of her character was less about theology and more about social control. By portraying her as a cautionary tale, men could warn women of the dangers of stepping outside their roles. See Lilith, the myth implies, and remember what happens when women refuse to submit. And yet, what is remarkable is how the story of Lilith survived and even flourished despite these distortions. For some, her figure became a symbol of resistance, even if cloaked in horror. She refused to accept a life defined by obedience. She spoke the sacred name of God, an act of empowerment reserved for the holy, and walked away. Even though tradition branded her as dangerous, the very act of telling her story kept alive the memory of a woman who would not bend. This duality, demon to some, icon to others, reveals the deeper truth behind the patriarchal backlash. Myths are never static. They evolve to reflect cultural anxieties. Lilith's demonization tells us less about her and more about the fears of those who told her story. She became a repository for everything the patriarchal order wished to suppress: female sexuality, independence, and power unbound by male authority. By turning her into a monster, society sought to contain what it could not control. Yet here lies the paradox. In trying to bury her, tradition gave her immortality. The very effort to suppress her voice ensured that her legend echoed louder through the centuries. Lilith, once banished from Eden, could never be banished from memory. Instead, she lived on, feared, forbidden, but never forgotten. And in that survival, she continues to whisper to us today, asking whether her demonization was truly about evil or about the fear of equality. As the story of Lilith traveled beyond Jewish tradition, her image shifted yet again, echoing through Christianity and Islam in subtle yet telling ways. Unlike in Jewish folklore, Lilith is not directly named in the canonical Christian Bible. Yet many scholars point to a single verse in Isaiah 34:14, where certain translations describe a night creature, or screech owl, dwelling in desolate places. The Hebrew word used here is Lilith, and some interpreters have argued that this is a faint echo of the Lilith myth. While mainstream Christianity never elevated her into a prominent figure, the archetype she represents, the dangerous, untamed feminine, continued to haunt its theology. In medieval Christian demonology, Lilith was sometimes reimagined as one of the devil's consorts, a seductress aligned with succubi and night demons. Just as Eve's story was weaponized to blame women for humanity's fall, Lilith's shadow served as a darker counterpart, not the naive tempter, but the willful corrupter. In art and sermons, she often appeared indirectly, the wild-haired femme fatale, the lurking presence in stories of witches, the demoness who preyed upon men in the night. Christianity may not have named her openly, but her silhouette loomed large in the collective imagination of the church. Islam, too, holds intriguing parallels, though Lilith herself is not mentioned in the Quran. Instead, Islamic tradition contains the concept of the Qarina, a female jinn who accompanies every human being, whispering temptations and leading them astray. Some folkloric accounts describe her as a beautiful but dangerous night spirit, seducing men and endangering women during childbirth. In these descriptions, the echoes of Lilith are hard to ignore. Both traditions share the idea of a feminine spirit associated with lust, temptation, and the vulnerability of new life. Both depict her as inhabiting the margins, not fully divine, but not entirely human, existing in that dangerous in-between space where fear and fascination overlap. Why did Lilith resonate across these traditions, even if under different names? The answer may lie in the universality of what she represents. Every culture has wrestled with the forces of sexuality, mortality, and rebellion. For patriarchal religions, the figure of the independent woman who refuses submission naturally became a focus of suspicion. Whether she is called Lilith, Lilith, succubus, or Qarina, the archetype remains constant, a female figure who embodies both desire and destruction, freedom and danger. But there is another layer worth considering. In both Christianity and Islam, male prophets and saints were depicted as battling temptations from feminine spirits, a symbolic drama where the purity of faith stood against the seduction of independence and passion. Lilith's archetype conveniently embodied the other side, the force against which holiness could define itself. She became, in effect, a necessary shadow, the symbol of what must be resisted so that piety could be preserved. And yet, even as she was suppressed, her image was never erased. Medieval Christians whispered of her in grimoires. Islamic storytellers invoked her presence in tales of jinn. In both traditions, she haunted the night, lingering on the edges of scripture, theology, and fear. She is absent from the central texts, yet present in the margins, a ghostly reminder of an ancient story too powerful to vanish completely. In this way, Lilith in Christian and Islamic contexts serves as proof of her enduring power. She is not bound by one religion or culture. She slips between them, shape-shifting, reappearing under new names, always embodying the same uneasy truth: that freedom, especially feminine freedom, can never be fully silenced, only transformed into shadow. If Jewish mysticism and biblical echoes painted Lilith as a dangerous presence, it was the rise of medieval demonology and later occult traditions that crowned her as a queen among demons. Within grimoires, magical texts, and secret teachings, Lilith's figure took on a far more structured role, no longer just a shadowy night spirit, but a sovereign in the hierarchy of hell. Here, she was not simply Adam's estranged partner. She became the embodiment of forbidden knowledge, sexual power, and demonic rule. One of the most enduring associations was her union with Samael, the fallen angel often identified as Satan or the accuser. Together, Lilith and Samael were imagined as the dark mirror of Adam and Eve, a couple not bound by divine harmony, but by rebellion and chaos. Where Adam and Eve symbolized life, fertility, and the continuation of God's creation, Lilith and Samael symbolized death, barrenness, and destruction. In the imaginations of mystics and demonologists, their union produced legions of demonic offspring, spirits of temptation, disease, and despair unleashed into the world. Medieval grimoires, such as the Zoharic traditions, and later Renaissance texts, depicted Lilith as the mother of succubi, those alluring night demons who preyed upon men in their dreams, stealing vitality and corrupting purity. This image reinforced her reputation as a thief of life and energy, a being who inverted natural roles of creation and nourishment. Instead of bearing children, she was said to destroy them. Instead of nurturing men, she consumed them. In this way, she became the archetypal inversion of womanhood as defined by patriarchal faiths. And yet, it was precisely this inversion that fascinated occultists. By the time of the Renaissance and beyond, Lilith began to reappear not only in warnings, but in magical invocations. In some strands of ceremonial magic, she was seen as a source of power for those willing to embrace the shadow. Amulets and incantations did not merely repel her, they sometimes sought to harness her strength. Her image was invoked in witchcraft, where she became associated with the archetype of the witch herself, independent, dangerous, outside the control of church and state. This occult fascination carried forward into the 19th and 20th centuries, when esoteric movements such as theosophy, ceremonial magic lodges, and eventually modern neo-pagan groups reimagined Lilith not as a demon, but as a goddess of sexual freedom and feminine power. For these groups, what traditional religion condemned, they celebrated. Lilith's refusal to bow became an emblem of liberation. Her sexuality, once demonized, became sacred. Her place at the side of Samael was reinterpreted as a reclamation of cosmic balance, the union of dark and light. Yet the darker interpretations never disappeared. In demonological manuals, she remained the queen of succubi, a temptress ruling over the night. In Catholic exorcism traditions, she was still invoked as a force of corruption to be cast out. This dual identity, demon to some, goddess to others, illustrates how powerful her archetype has become. Few figures can embody such extremes and still remain whole in myth. Ultimately, Lilith's place in occult and demonological tradition reflects the way humans grapple with what they fear most: the untamed, the forbidden, and the free. To the fearful, she is a destroyer. To the daring, she is an ally. To all, she is unavoidable. Her story, once whispered in fear beside cradles, has now become a symbol studied, invoked, and reclaimed by those seeking the truths hidden in shadows. If ancient texts painted Lilith as a demon, and occultists reimagined her as a source of forbidden power, modern culture has transformed her yet again. This time, into a psychological archetype and a cultural icon. Over the past 2 centuries, Lilith has stepped out of the shadows of folklore and mysticism to become a figure invoked in literature, art, psychology, and even astrology. Her survival across millennia is nothing short of remarkable, but it also speaks to the enduring relevance of the questions she raises about freedom, sexuality, and power. In the 19th century, Romantic and pre-Raphaelite artists began to rediscover Lilith, often portraying her not as a monstrous demon, but as a dangerously beautiful woman. Painters such as Dante Gabriel Rossetti depicted her with flowing hair, seductive eyes, and an aura of mystery. For them, Lilith symbolized the femme fatale, the irresistible woman whose independence and sexuality posed both allure and danger. Literature followed suit, with poets and novelists invoking her name as shorthand for untamed female power. Rather than banish her, modernity began to romanticize her. The 20th century added new dimensions to her myth. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung's theories of the archetypes provided a framework to understand Lilith not just as a mythological figure, but as a representation of the collective unconscious. For Jungian psychology, she embodies the shadow feminine, the aspects of womanhood repressed by patriarchal culture. Rage, sexuality, defiance, and independence. To confront Lilith in dreams or myths, then, was to confront the denied aspects of the psyche itself. This interpretation opened the door for Lilith to become more than a demon of the night. She became a symbol of inner integration and psychological wholeness. Astrology further expanded her presence. The concept of Black Moon Lilith, a calculated lunar point in astrological charts, has gained popularity among modern astrologers. Black Moon Lilith is said to reveal where an individual resists control, seeks autonomy, and confronts their shadow. For many spiritual seekers, this astrological Lilith is not about fear, but about empowerment, reclaiming the parts of oneself that tradition has suppressed. She has thus become a guide for self-discovery, a celestial reminder of the importance of honoring the hidden self. Popular culture has also embraced Lilith in striking ways. From television series and movies to novels and music, she reappears again and again, sometimes as a villain, sometimes as a misunderstood heroine. She appears in shows like Supernatural and Lucifer, in comics, and even in video games. In each retelling, she carries the same essence: a woman who will not submit, who wields both beauty and danger, who embodies a force that cannot be easily controlled. Feminist movements of the late 20th century explicitly reclaimed Lilith as a symbol of resistance against patriarchal oppression. She became a rallying figure, representing women's struggle for autonomy in sexuality, politics, and spirituality. In this reinterpretation, Lilith is no longer a demon to be feared, but an icon to be celebrated. The first woman who said no and paid the price, but whose voice still echoes as inspiration. What is striking is how this modern Lilith does not erase the old myths, but reinterprets them. Her reputation as a child killer and seductress is seen not as proof of evil, but as evidence of how threatening independence appeared to male-dominated societies. By embracing her, modern culture turns the accusation into a badge of honor. Lilith today stands at the crossroads of myth and modernity. She is at once a biblical shadow, a mystical queen, a psychological archetype, and a feminist icon. Her journey through time reveals not only the endurance of myth, but the way stories evolve to meet the needs of each generation. In her, we see not only fear, but possibility, the power of the feminine unchained, the voice of rebellion that refuses to be silenced. As we arrive at the end of this exploration, one thing becomes clear. Lilith is far more than a footnote in forgotten folklore. She is a figure who embodies the tensions that have haunted humanity for millennia, between freedom and control, equality and hierarchy, fear and reverence. Was she Adam's first wife, created as his equal and cast aside when she refused to submit? Or was she a queen of demons, ruling in shadows, haunting the nights of mothers and the dreams of men? The truth, perhaps, is that she is both, and more. Lilith's story reveals how myths are shaped not only by faith, but by the cultural anxieties of the people who tell them. In her refusal to bow, she became a mirror for patriarchal fear, and thus was branded dangerous, unclean, even murderous. Yet that same act of defiance makes her a timeless symbol of autonomy and selfhood. Every generation that has revisited her tale has seen something different in her. The demoness to ward off, the archetype to wrestle with, or the icon to reclaim. What makes Lilith so enduring is not that she fits neatly into one role, but that she defies them all. She slips through categories: wife or demon, goddess or monster, victim or villain. In doing so, she forces us to confront our own shadows, the parts of human nature and society that we try to silence but cannot erase. Her exile from Eden is not just about a quarrel between Adam and Lilith. It is about the exile of an idea, that men and women could be equal, created from the same dust, standing side by side without domination. In Christian and Islamic traditions, she became a whisper in scripture, a phantom in the night. In Jewish mysticism, she was both a cosmic principle and a household fear. In the occult, she became a queen of demons, and in modern culture, she is celebrated as a feminist icon and psychological archetype. Across time, she has refused to disappear. And maybe that is the lesson we are left with. Some truths, no matter how suppressed, always find a way to endure. So, as we close this journey, ask yourself, what do you see in Lilith? A terrifying demon, a dangerous woman, a misunderstood goddess, or a reflection of yourself? Perhaps the real power of her myth is not in whether she was Adam's first wife or the queen of demons, but in the way she forces us to wrestle with the boundaries of freedom, the meaning of equality, and the shadows we still carry within. Lilith is not just a character from the past. She is a presence that lingers, in myth, in memory, and maybe in the questions you will carry after hearing her story.